We begin with an escalation in the war with Iran. The Pentagon deploying a Marine Expeditionary Unit to the Middle East, a rapid response force of about 2,500 Marines and sailors. In Baghdad, video shows smoke and flames near the U.S. Embassy compound, with early images appearing to show damage to a building in the area. And President Trump says the U.S. has now bombed every military target on Iran's critical oil export hub, Harg Island. I'm Michael Smerconish in the Philly Burbs. Is it now time to rally around the flag? Americans are less supportive of our attack on Iran than we've been at the start of most other conflicts. According to a New York Times analysis, the Times cited CNN polling noting that 41% approval is what the president enjoyed immediately after the initiation of the attack on Iran, with support of the Iran attacks ranging from 27% in a Reuters Ipsos poll to 50% in a Fox News poll. After the U.S. was attacked at Pearl Harbor, 97% of the public supported a declaration of war against Japan. That's according to Gallup. And when George W. Bush, post 9/11, put troops on the ground in Afghanistan, 92% of Americans agreed, also according to Gallup. Americans are split across party lines on the war in Iran. The data is consistent regardless of the source. Take your pick: CNN, Fox, Reuters, Ipsos, Quinnipiac, The Washington Post. Chalk that up to polarization. This time, we're all just suiting up in our partisan jerseys. Republicans are overwhelmingly supportive. Democrats likewise in opposition. Independents are the tiebreakers and side more with the D's than with the R's. And the net impact is that a majority are in opposition. But there's an additional explanation. Emmy Award-winning political journalist Jeff Greenfield wrote a memorable column for Politico 4 years ago when President Biden was weighing the extent to which the U.S. would support Ukraine against the Russian invasion. Greenfield explained that contrary to conventional wisdom, we rarely rally around the flag unless we've been attacked. Quote, foreign crises, even wars, rarely produce anything like national unity. During the Civil War, deadly riots broke out in New York City over the prospect of a draft. In 1864, Lincoln's election opponent was George McClellan, whom Lincoln had replaced as the commanding general of the Union forces. From Korea to Vietnam to Iraq, Americans have fought wars amid clamorous discontent at home, even in World War II, the, quote, last good war. Discontent over everything from military strategy to home front policies divided us politically. In the 1942 midterms, Democrats lost 8 Senate seats and 45 House seats, losing the national popular House vote by a 1 million vote margin. Well, we haven't been attacked by Iran, thank God. The administration has not made a compelling case that we faced an imminent threat. I think Major Garrett framed an appropriate question for Secretary Pete Hegseth on 60 Minutes last Sunday night when he asked if the attack on Iran is more about opportunity than imminent threat. Hegseth said that that was silly and academic.
Some might look at that sequence of events and say, well, that it was an opportunity more than an imminent threat.
I mean, I think much of that discussion is silly and academic. They've been killing us for 47 years. They have unabated nuclear ambitions. And when we obliterated their nuclear program at the end of the 12-day war in Operation Midnight Hammer, they should have come to the table and said, okay, we get it. You mean business. We're not going to have nukes. And they haven't. And as a result, when the president looks at it, generationally, he sees a threat that would continue to gather.
No doubt opinions on the war are being driven by opinions about the commander-in-chief, whose approval rating remains underwater. But what if views about Trump are clouding our judgment? David Boyce is one of the nation's brightest and most prominent trial lawyers. His client list crosses the political divide. In 2000, you'll remember he represented Vice President Al Gore before the Supreme Court in Bush v. Gore. Later, he teamed up with conservative attorney Ted Olson, a former Solicitor General under President George W. Bush, as the two challenged California's same-sex marriage ban. He's also represented blue-chip corporate clients like IBM and Oracle in high-stakes commercial litigation. Well, Boyce just published an essay in the Wall Street Journal under the headline, Partisanship on Iran is Dangerous for America. I say it's a must-read. Quote, those of us who generally oppose Mr. Trump, but who recognize the threat Iran poses, need to support the military action not because we owe anything to Mr. Trump, but because we owe it to ourselves, our country, and our children. If we opposed the war and succeeded in pressuring Mr. Trump to curtail it before the mission is accomplished, we would have the satisfaction of defeating someone we generally oppose, which might help ourselves politically, but America would be worse for it. There's something to what Boyce is arguing. From the founding of the Islamic Republic of Iran in 1979, they've strongly opposed America, or as they call us, the Great Satan. Some highlights: they took over our embassy holding 52 hostages for 444 days. Iran backed Hezbollah, killed 241 American military personnel in the Beirut barracks bombing. It's estimated that Iran is responsible for over 600 American troop deaths in Iraq. And today, according to the Trump administration, Iran will not back off development of nuclear weapons. According to Boyce, if Trump hadn't acted, his successor would have been left with a more dangerous choice. Boyce makes a more compelling case than has the administration thus far as to why, regardless of how we got here, the mission needs a successful conclusion. As he wrote, quote, "If we believe that Iran presents a serious threat, we need to support the president on this issue. There's plenty to disagree with him about, and we don't need to like or admire him. But on Iran, we should be on common ground, not primarily because we want to reduce partisanship in foreign affairs, although that is conceivable, not because the voters will reward us for a more measured response, although I hope they will, but because it is the right thing to do for our country, our children, and the Democrat who will succeed Mr. Trump as president." Many, including me, have noted that the president has not laid out a clear rationale for the use of force, and that the reasons given by the administration for prosecuting this war now have been questionable. But doing the right thing, even for the wrong reason, is still doing the right thing. Which leads me to today's poll question at Smerconish.com. Should opinions on the war in Iran transcend one's view of President Trump? We're tracking new video into CNN showing smoke and small flames rising from a building near the U.S. Embassy compound in Baghdad. It comes as several Gulf states reported interceptions overnight, including in Qatar, where the U.S. Embassy there remains under a shelter-in-place order. Meanwhile, President Trump says the U.S. bombed every military target on Iran's Harg Island, which handles 90% of the country's crude oil exports. According to Iranian state media, no oil infrastructure was damaged in the attacks, but President Trump threatened to attack the island's oil infrastructure if Iran continues to block ships from traversing the Strait of Hormuz. This coming amid news that the Pentagon is deploying a Marine Expeditionary Unit to the Middle East, although it's not yet clear what the unit will be used for or where exactly it will be deployed. Joining me now is CNN senior military analyst, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, Admiral James Stavridis. Admiral, for Bloomberg, you just wrote about scenarios that might necessitate troops on the ground, including Harg Island. And you wrote these words: "A tempting target would be Harg Island in the Persian Gulf. This is the main location for the Iranians' oil and gas terminal transits, and depriving them of the crown jewel of their energy system would be a significant achievement. It's only 16 miles off the coast of Iran and well northwest of the newly mined Strait of Hormuz. Simply destroying the infrastructure by bombing is a possibility." Key words now, but the U.S. hasn't done so yet. We just did, because controlling it would be far better. What did you mean at the end of that graph?
Controlling it would mean that we could use the leverage of owning it. As you said, Michael, 90% of the Iranian oil and gas flows through Harg Island. So go in there, take it. You don't have to destroy the infrastructure. In effect, you hold it hostage. You say to the Iranians, "Oh, you want to close this Strait of Hormuz? Well, we have a card to play. We are going to control Harg Island, and let's have a conversation about whether you'd like to open the Strait of Hormuz again." Michael, it's a bigger question, which is, how do you get the Iranians to back off so we can have oil flowing through there? I can think of four things, and, it's March Madness. Let's start with basketball. You can escort ships, point-to-point defense, kind of one-on-one on a basketball court. Problem with that, it's very expensive, time-consuming to go one-on-one. Number two, you can do area defense, zone defense in basketball, if you will. And that would be convoys. You marshal up these ships, you put them in convoys. And then number three, you do local superiority. So you take away the small boats, the mines, the ballistic missiles. And number four, we come to Karg Island. You use a strategic offense and take a target like Karg and hold it at risk for the Iranians. Once you blow it up, that leverage is gone. So I think, final thought here, Michael, I think the Pentagon was smart to go in and take out the military part, but it's still an asset Iran will continue to want. That's leverage. Now we can use that going forward as we move hopefully towards some kind of termination of the conflict.
This morning via Truth Social, the president said in part, I have chosen not to wipe out the oil infrastructure on the island. However, should Iran or anyone else do anything to interfere with the free and safe passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, I will immediately reconsider this decision. Your reaction, Admiral?
Thank you for your attention to this matter, as the saying goes.
Right.
I think the president has it absolutely correct on this one, which is precisely what I just said. It is take out their military capability to defend it, hold it at risk, and what's the advantage? Now the Iranians, we hope, will be less likely to use massive swarms of small boats to go after the big tankers, less likely to put thousands of mines into the water and turn the place into a hellscape, less likely to use short-range ballistic missiles to go after the tankers, less likely to use limpet mines affixed to the tanker. So the thought here, and I take it from that Truth Social, is the president is saying to Iran, we have a card to play here. Don't overstep what you want to do offensively in the Gulf.
School me quickly on the Strait of Hormuz. We talk about it. We look at the video. You've sailed it dozens of times. And I know that at its narrowest point, it's 21 miles. I'm sure you don't sail toward the edges, so you're in the middle. There's only 10 miles to the shoreline. The issue, I take it, is one of missiles and drone strikes being easy to launch. Only one of them needs to get through. And consequently, it's bedeviling how you can have passage in the current climate. Can you do it without taking the shoreline and limiting the ability of drones and missiles?
Ultimately, we're going to have to control the strait, not only on the sea and not only in the air, but we are going to have to take away the Iranian ability to launch from the land. Now, whether you need a permanent occupying force, I don't think so. I think you can do a lot of that with air power. But your categorization is exactly right. It's 20 miles or so from land to land, but it's a narrow traffic separation scheme. Think of it as a highway that where the water is deep enough for the big tankers to sail through. And so it's only a mile on either side, north and south, to get through that strait. So at the end of the day, Michael, it's a very challenging military problem. And oh, by the way, we spent a lot of time, and we should, talking about Strait of Hormuz closure. There are a couple other choke points right next door. One is the bottom of the Red Sea, where the Houthis are kind of the dog that haven't barked yet during this part of the conflict. And of course, the Suez Canal is another very significant choke point. Could the Iranians go after either of those using Houthi proxies or terrorist activity up in the Suez? I'm sure the Pentagon is looking at those options and preparing for them as well.
Give me just the 30-second soundbite in response to my commentary where I looked to David Boies in writing for the Wall Street Journal, who says, regardless of what you think of the president, the issues in this case now transcend the partisanship and ought to be decided on the merits. Gut check from you?
I know David Boies well, one of our smartest Americans and strategic thinker and someone who plays the ball down the middle of the field. Worth reading that piece and thinking about it. One point I would add, Michael, to your excellent examination of how do we get to this polarization, there's another aspect hanging over this conflict and its recent history. Many Americans vividly recall, have tragically been touched by the forever wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Therefore, I think another conflict in the Middle East is a particularly high bar to get over.
Admiral Stavridis, we always appreciate your expertise. Thank you. And to those who are at home, make sure you're following me on X or on YouTube, and perhaps I'll read your comment during the course of the program. From the world of what? X, I think. Let's see it. A key part of Americans' rally around the flag is leaders making the case that the war is critical to U.S. national security interests and is the only option. Trump has not made the case. Joseph, I said in my commentary, I thought that David Boyce was more articulate in advancing the here's why this needs to take place than has, frankly, anyone from the administration so far. Okay, but here we are now. And it's a shame now that instead people are getting bogged down and suiting up in their partisan jerseys, as I mentioned a moment ago, instead of evaluating the issue on the merits. They hate us. Their leadership has hated us for half a century. They've not given up their nukes. They've threatened to come after us time and time again. Were they really imminent? Was the situation imminent? I have my doubts, but I have no doubt as to whether the world's a safer place with the leadership having been decapitated. Yeah, I get it. The sun is now an apple who apparently hasn't fallen far from the tree. That's got to be dealt with. I want to know what you think. Go to my website at Smerconish.com. I have to tell you something about today's poll question. When you vote, you see the result. I'm normally, because frankly, I want to make sure that the poll is functioning, one of the first to vote. That wasn't the case today. By the time I voted, there were 700 plus who had voted. We'll end up at 30, 40,000. And I was really surprised. I was really surprised by the result when only 700 had voted. Here's the question that I'm asking. Should opinions on the war in Iran transcend whatever it is you think of President Trump? Go vote at Smerconish.com. Up ahead, U.S. Central Command confirms that strikes on Iran's critical oil export hub, Harg Island, hit more than 90 military targets last night as Iran fires back with threats of retaliatory attacks. President Trump says the only outcome there is unconditional surrender. But is that a military objective or something much larger? David Sanger will join us next. Also, don't forget to sign up for the newsletter at Smerconish.com when you're voting on today's poll question. Oh, check that out. Eric Alley drew it for us.